Greetings sailors and welcome to a pair of viewer replays. And I've actually decided to go with a pair today, even though that's going to make for quite a long video, because we've got an interesting before and after comparison here. So it's the Kiev, it's the tier 7 Soviet destroyer, and it, along with all the other Soviet destroyers from tier 5 to, I think, tier 7, tier 8? Was it tier 9? I think it was actually up to tier 9. Back in patch 2.4... 2.4? What am I saying? Back in patch 5.2, there we go, I got the numbers correct this time. Where did 2.4 come from? I don't know. Anyway, they got hit by the nerf bat, and the Kiev in particular actually got a double hit because they all lost some fire chance and HE damage from their guns. But the Kiev in particular also lost some hit points because I think it had the best win rate for its tier for a destroyer. It was just too good. It was like a miniature cruiser, basically. And they're still pretty good, as we're going to see. But it was too good. I think the win rate was probably... It was probably well in excess of 50%. So this is pre-nerf. This is XX Master 2004. I think we're just going to call it X Master. In the Kiev, very good matchmaking. In fact, both these games are going to be top tier matchmaking, and you're going to get to see the this thing is basically, it was like a miniature cruiser. I will note, by the way, having said that the tiers 5 to tier 9 lost fire chance and they lost some HE damage, the Gremiashi of course didn't. So not only does the Gremiashi have the old the concealment extension, or I don't even know what's the elegant way to put it. Anyway, the detection range extends by the old amount of 3.9 kilometers rather than the new amount of 5.9. Not only that, but it has the more powerful HE shells, and it has the better fire chance. So yeah, you get one of those as a stealth gunboat, and by comparison it's a bit overpowered, just a little bit. Anyway, but because it's a premium, of course, they're not going to touch it unless it is... well, hell, I think, actually, they probably will never touch it, just because it is one that's never been on sale as a general premium. It was a pre-order premium, basically. So it's unlikely to ever be on sale again. So those of us that have a Gremiashi, we get to enjoy the OP experience a bit, and everyone else just has to miss out, I suppose, which is not a bad thing, because if there was Gremiashis running around just everywhere at tier 5, it'd be a less fun experience. Anyway, X-Master's just putting the guns to work. He's not done that much damage so far, but the rate of fire combined with the range of the guns, because the Soviet destroyers all at least still have that going for them. They've all, for destroyers, got pretty good ranges on their guns. And so he's just hammering away and hammering away. And the thing is, with these mid to high tier Soviet destroyers, of course, they all have terrible torpedoes, apart from the Gremiashi, which once again wins out in really most regards. But yes, they all have 4-kilometer torpedoes. Now, by the time you get to the Kiev, I think the base speed of them is something like 70 knots. I can't remember for the upgraded ones, I think. So if you get up close enough to use those torpedoes, they are lethal. There's very little chance of an enemy, especially an enemy battleship, evading torpedoes that are that fast at that close of a range. And if you can set up an ambush around an island or whatever, or through smoke, then it's difficult to set that up, especially if you've got a wary battleship driver. But if you have a completely typical, stereotypical battleship driver, then maybe it's a bit less difficult. But yeah, you can do a lot of damage with those torpedoes. You just have to get very close to do it. So he's going to cap, and that's obviously going to bring in some nice XP. Although this was before that ludicrous boost to XP from capping, so it's not going to be as much as it would be these days. And once he's capped, which will give his team 2/3 of the cap points, which is kind of useful right now. They are badly behind on points. They haven't killed many enemy ships at all. That means that they're not going to be hemorrhaging victory points quite so quickly. But still, it's going to be a bit of an uphill fight. But of course, coming back from this position, it doesn't take that much to turn it around. It's not impossible, far from it. Of course, it can still steadily slide downhill. A lot depends on the rest of his team, you know, not dying. But they at least have 2/3 of the cap points. Although, having said that, A is now being capped by the enemy team. He's also got dive bombers coming for him, so let's hope they... no, okay, no damage. He does get some critical damage to his torpedo launchers from the HE splash, basically, but no actual damage to his ship. Now, this is the point where I was looking at the replay first time round and thinking, this is crazy. What's he doing? He's just charging right out into the open, firing his guns. And this is incredibly risky. I mean, you've seen the carrier, and you're going to see just like the rate of fire and the ability to keep those guns pounding away, and the HE damage on a weakly armoured target like a carrier. And he's just nailing this guy over and over. But at the same time, he's got a New York that's in very close proximity, and a York that's actually pretty close as well. And nobody's shooting at him. I don't know why. This is an extremely dangerous maneuver, but the enemy team is just letting him get away with it. And he actually puts out torpedoes, it looks like, against the Ryujo there. And I think they are both spreads against the Ryujo, which I think was a bit of a mistake. I mean, his shooting hasn't been super great, and you'll see later on again when he's firing at a battleship and he's firing at the waterline, and just like here, he's firing at the waterline rather than the superstructure. But that doesn't matter when that New York just blundered into his torpedoes. I don't think those torpedoes were even meant for the New York. The New York actually turned and took a face full of those. So that was a double strike and a devastating strike, all in very rapid succession. So he got the full health of that carrier, and I think he got nearly the full health of that battleship as well. So that catapulted him, damage-wise, way up there. He's now just shy of 70,000 damage. And that happened all in the space of, what, a minute and a half? Yeah, so it was a crazy maneuver. It was incredibly risky, and the enemy team just let him get away with it. Now, he did have some backup. I mean, there was the New Mexico back there and the Nuremberg back there, also giving fire support. But even so, you see a destroyer closing the distance on you, and surely you turn your attention to it. I mean, obviously the carrier didn't have that option, but the New York and the York, I don't know. I really don't know. Anyway, so he's now pelting this York with HE shells, trying to set more fires, just trying to do more damage, and it's looking a little unlikely that he'll get to use his torpedoes again at this point, although you never know. But he'd have to close the distance again, and surely no one's going to be that foolish to let him get so close again when he just devastated that New York so rapidly. I mean, the difference in tiers did help him out a lot there, because obviously the New York, being a tier 5 battleship in a tier 7 game, is at the lower end of the hit point scale. He didn't have to get that many torpedo hits. Although, having said that, you know, they might be short range, but they're still torpedoes. It doesn't take that many of them to really rack up the damage. And in fact, you go up the tiers and the torpedo damage, particularly in comparison to battleship hit points, it really does scale up quite a lot, and you get to those tier 9 and 10 torpedoes that can do like 20,000 damage a go. Even at tier 9 and 10, when you're sailing around in like Yamatos and Montanas, it still doesn't take that many torpedo hits to kill you. But when you've got that 2-tier difference, then yeah, that really does help as well. So he's pummeled that York down quite far health-wise. The Nuremberg's taken a right battering. The New Mexico, presumably, is taking a few shells as well, because there's a whole bunch of enemy ships around in the middle. Now, there's a bunch of allies way over to the west, all around the A point. No one's actually capturing A yet, although it looks like there's a Pensacola going for it. But they're in danger of losing C as well, and they're still down on points, although not as far as they were. And it's at this point that this Nagato sails into view. Now, we know there was Hatsuharu up in that corner somewhere as well, but he hasn't been seen for a while, so basically this Nagato seems to be more or less on his own. And even though you can't really I mean, I think you can still fire stealth from ships like the Kiev, but it's probably a very narrow range. But he's not even trying. He's actually closing the distance. And when I was talking earlier about you can use islands to ambush people, I mean, this Nagato's seen him. He's been firing all the while. The Nagato knows he's there. So why the Nagato wouldn't now be desperately trying to turn around to avoid passing close to the island, to avoid leaving himself no room to maneuver, I don't know. Now, again, this is risky, though, for X-Master. I mean, the guy knows he's coming. Hell yeah, he knows he's coming. And he correctly guesses which side of the island is coming round. And there's the shots from the Nagato. But, well, you can see exactly how much damage that did, or rather, didn't do. Now, was that just horrific RNG? Was that poor shooting on the Nagato's part? It's really hard to tell from this point of view, but it could go either way. And because it was already fairly low health, that didn't take that many that time. So that was, even though he turned to avoid most of them, it only took 2. So we skipped on ahead again. The enemy team did indeed cap C. They still have control of A. But in order to stabilise things, X-Master has come down to cap B. Once again, they're still behind. But again, he's had to cap. And having capped, which was absolutely the right thing to do, that slows down the enemy's rate of victory point acquisition. And they've actually, in terms of numbers, turned this right around. And there we go, they're actually capping A now as well. So it's only 3 enemy ships that are left alive now. The Hatsuharu, who's somewhere in that northwest quadrant, and this Fuso and Cleveland over here. So he's just trying to get this Fuso spotted. He has got allies in range, in theory, to actually shoot this guy, and as it happens, he's just stationary. And again, shooting at the hull. There's plenty of superstructure to hit on a Fuso, and he would have much more luck setting him on fire, or would have. I mean, this might have been back when it had better fire chance and better shell damage, but you're going to help yourself out greatly if you're hitting the right bit of the ship. And even I, to be fair, sometimes forget when I'm switching between HE and AP shells, more often in cruisers than the destroyers. But sometimes I'll just be so locked in the habit of fire at the hull, firing AP shells, and then I switch to HE, and I'm still firing at the hull. It's fair enough. But, I mean, also, to be fair in another way, this replay is from a while ago, and I can't even remember, like September? Actually, no, it was later than that, it was like December, because patch 5.2, that was in December. I think that was later in December. So yeah, it's a couple of months ago, but not that long ago. And if he's still playing the game, I can only presume that X-Master has improved along the way, because it's not like he's playing badly in this game. It's just his shooting was a little off in places, that's all. So opens up at the Cleveland, and that's probably the riskier target, but oh, hello, well, that Fuso's just hove into view. And he's awfully close. So will we get a 3rd battleship succumbing to these very short-range torpedoes? Well, we'll see. We'll see very shortly as well, because he's awfully close now. Now, I did wonder about the new captain's skill that sacrifices 20% of your torpedo range for extra speed. I did wonder if that might be attractive for some Soviet destroyer captains. There we go, he's taking some damage, but no, this is not going to miss. Not at that speed, not at this distance. Boom! Confederate. Over 100,000 damage. And a lot of that was with torpedoes. It's tiny, crappy range torpedoes. But, you know, he made it work. Anyway, yes, the captain skill. I was wondering, because, you know, you lose, I think 800 meters is 20% of that, 4 kilometers. At least for tiers 5 to 7, I think it is. So I wondered, you know, if people are going to get that close anyway, would they maybe take the extra range and get the extra, or lose the range and get the extra speed? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what people's feedback is. Anyway, that was 3,000 base XP. And even though, of course, he capped, these days he probably would have had more XP from the capping, because of course that was bumped up considerably. So that was actually quite a lot from the HE shells. 46,000 damage, another 17k from fires, and then 54, nearly 55,000 from the torpedoes. So yeah, it was basically a miniature cruiser. And I think it did deserve a nerf from that state. But did they nerf it into the ground? No, it's still quite a capable ship, I think, as we're going to see. This is a much more recent replay. This is from A-Kit over on the Asian server. And we've actually had a replay of his on the channel before. I think it was an Omaha game, and that, again, was probably a couple of months ago. Also December, I think, in fact. Or was it earlier than that? I can't remember. Anyway, rather different ship this time. Well, different from an Omaha, anyway. And it's a rather different map. This is, of course, Land of Fire. I say that with that inflection that means I'm not quite sure. And I think it's Land of Fire, but yeah, anyway. So he's pulled into the smallest of the cap circles, C, and as we can already tell from the traces and stuff he's spotted, yes, there's at least 2 of the enemy destroyers, of which there are 5 on the enemy team, so at least 2 of them are here, and they're backed up by cruisers as well, so he's got to be careful. So he pops smoke, and the enemy team aren't, the enemy destroyers aren't trying to disrupt the capping so far. And oh, there's the Anshan just spotted. Except, I think one of them now is, because that capture meter's not advancing any further. And there's the Hatsaharu. Now you'd think that island would actually be small enough that you could just easily shoot over it with destroyer guns. But maybe that was another thing that got changed, because the arc in the arc of the shells, the trajectory, whatever you want to call it, seemed quite high. So I don't know, maybe they changed that as well. It wasn't in the patch notes that I found, but it's entirely possible it's one of those things that they changed and neglected to put in the patch notes, as they occasionally do. So he knows the Hatsaharu's just sitting there blocking him from capping. He puts torpedoes out, but sadly he doesn't quite get the direction right. And they would have actually hit that Anshan, who's just sitting there. So his smoke's down, and he's already taking some damage. So he decides that discretion is the better part of valor, because the enemy team have more of a presence here. He does have a friendly Hatsaharu and a Nuremberg nearby. Or is that a Königsberg? I think that's actually a Königsberg. But the enemy team, of course, I mean, it's 4-3. However, they are not really playing that well, these enemy destroyers. I mean, they're just, I don't know, they're just being very stationary. And I know they're trying to cap, but they're not using cover quite as well as they could be. And the fact that they're letting themselves get spotted, I mean, the Anshan, okay, that's basically a Soviet destroyer and has Soviet detection ranges, but the Hatsaharu not so much. So the rate of fire, as you can see, just as good, and he's just pounding away at this Anshan. Hopefully he's going to get this kill. Not quite. Go on, one more will do it. That's all he needs. And there we go, first kill. That's actually a first blood medal, because it's the first kill of either team. So that's one down, and that has actually evened things a bit. However, there's also a Nagato coming over this side. And oh, hello. Nice little surprise from the Hatsaharu there, who once again just sat stationary. He's capped now. Doesn't need to be sitting there. So, I don't know. Not the smartest destroyer player I've ever seen, but okay. If you want to make it easy for the enemy team to kill you, then by all means. And he gets the kill, so that's kill number 2. That's very nice. It was a good start. He has lost a fair amount of health, though. I mean, in the previous battle, X-Master got away with some rather risky things purely because the enemy team wasn't paying that much attention to the fact that, or some of the enemy team anyway, that they were letting a destroyer get very, very close. But this looks like it might be a slightly tougher fight. Now the Nagato opens up at him, but fortunately it all misses. Of course, with the smoke out, the Nagato can't exactly see him right now, so he can just sit and fire from the smoke with impunity and recapture C. They are ahead on points, and oh hello, that Miyoko's rather low health. So if they can cap this point, that's fine. They'll have control of 2 of the cap points. They'll maintain this rather healthy lead. And it looks like they're on their way to securing this end of the map rather nicely as well. There's still an Omaha over here somewhere. But apart from that, it's just the Nagato. So if they can take these people out, then they've got this end of the map secured. They can start pushing westwards and really squeezing the enemy team, you know, putting their backs against the wall. However, of course, you say that like it's a simple thing, but nothing ever goes quite like you imagine it will. Now, it looks like he's actually firing from stealth here, and this is towards the edge of his range. So it makes me wonder if he, in fact, I mean, it's not that close to the edge of his range, so maybe he has got that captain skill that gives him extra stealth. Or maybe he just doesn't have the alert, the captain alert skill. Maybe that would have been really obvious if I'd been paying attention to the earlier stages. I think maybe he just doesn't have the captain alert skill, and I've just been not paying attention to that, which would not be at all like me, right? Now, unfortunately, he runs aground, and oh no, there we go, detected. So he does have the captain alert skill, and he was actually firing from stealth there. So apparently, it's still very much possible to fire from stealth. So he must have the he must have had the 5th rank captain skill, because of course, with the patch we've just had, everyone got a free skill reset, but I'm sure he took similar-ish skills. So he hurriedly backs off the rocks, and that's just when the Omaha pulls into view, and he's actually now switched to AP shells. And I actually said this in the Anshan video. Especially with these Soviet destroyers, do not discount the AP at all. Especially as in this situation where he's firing against a lower tier light cruiser. However, the angling is far from optimal, and maybe he would have been better off with some AP, because he's not really having a lot of luck with HE rather. He's not really having a huge amount of luck with his AP shells right now. If the guy turns a bit more broadside, then he should get some lovely Citadel hits, but as it is, he's struggling to do any damage. However, as he's getting a bit closer, oh, there we go, double Citadel. He's got more of the side armor right now, so that was a lovely hit, 5,000 in one go, and gets another Citadel in just before he dies. Unfortunately, our friend in the Cleveland here has apparently forgotten, having ground through the Omaha himself, that the Omaha has torpedoes. So as a last little parting gift, the Omaha just, you know, put a couple of fish in the water, and so therefore, goodbye, Mr. Cleveland. And that's unfortunate, because the Cleveland would have been really useful right about now to setting this Nagato on fire. However, the Nagato does also have a Hatsuharu coming up behind him, and that's not optimal for dropping torpedoes, but if A-Kit can keep this guy distracted from the fact there is a Hatsuharu teammate, but then that will help out his teammate a lot. I presume that's why he did it. I mean, he's obviously just trying to set the guy on fire, sap his health, and just generally be a nuisance, but of course, the best bet, I mean, trying to do all this with his guns, trying to take the Nagato down from that amount of health with his guns would take quite a long time. So I presume he was also doing this as a distraction for his Hatsuharu teammate. And maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't know. But, you know, sometimes I try to make these little guesses about what people are thinking, because occasionally I'll get somebody that sends me an email and it'll have a kind of a really detailed breakdown of what they were doing and what they were thinking at various points of the battle, and what their kind of objectives were and their thought processes. And other times it's just, you know, here's a good game I have, and, you know, replay link. And I have to kind of make it up as I go along, but, you know, hey, I've had some practice at that by this point, right? So, in terms of the teams, things have evened out a lot. The enemy team really brought it back in terms of kills, and we've actually skipped ahead a little bit here, with the enemy team having taken control of B. But they're still well ahead on points, so that early advantage in points means they've got some breathing room. However, although this is looking alright right now, this Aoba is definitely looking outmatched against him and the Nuremberg, and he's actually taking some torpedo hits there from the Nuremberg, which is very nice. And obviously the Hatsuharu having knocked out the Nagato, I mean, they at least have this entire end of the map like to themselves now. That's fine. They don't have to worry about anyone coming up around behind him. But unfortunately, this Nuremberg isn't going to last too much longer. Now, the Farragut's been spotted by opening fire, presumably. We know there's an Omaha back there. And further to the west, well, there's actually 2 other enemy destroyers left alive, a Minikaze and a Hatsuharu. All the way over in the west, we've got the Congo dancing with a Hatsuharu, and the New Mexico is going to end up having to deal with the Minikaze. And as a battleship driver, I can say, you really don't want to ever be in that situation, dealing with a destroyer when you're on your own, because you're then having to deal with your own slow reload, your own slow turret turn time, and it can be, like, you can get away with it, you can live, but it relies on the destroyer captains screwing up, basically. I will say, though, both the New Mexico and the Congo survived for a surprisingly long time. I was watching the minimap at this point and thinking, I mean, look at the Hatsuharu trace and the Congo trace right now. And there goes the Nuremberg, I think. Or was it Königsberg? No, the Hatsuharu just died. Okay, never mind. They lost the Hatsuharu to the Farragut. But yeah, I was looking at this and thinking at this close range, right, one or the other of them is going to die really soon. And yet they seem to dance around each other at very close range for a very long time. Look, both the Congo and the enemy Hatsuharu still alive. I don't know. That must have been a very interesting little engagement of its own. But sadly, of course, we don't get to see that. That's all well out of render. I guess I was wrong about the Nuremberg also. I keep saying, is it Nuremberg or Königsberg? I can't actually... And it's a Nuremberg. Okay. It's hard to see because I have this previewed on my second monitor, but my second monitor is a smaller monitor than my main monitor, which is 1080p, so anyway, it's sometimes hard to read the names. So that's the Farragut out the way with. The Omaha is severely damaged, and A-Kit is now free to cap B. New Mexico and the Congo still both somehow alive. In fact, the New Mexico is actually trying to capture A. But I think both the Hatsuharu and the Minikaze at that point were concentrating their focus on him because, of course, he was trying to cap. And you get actually pretty decent XP for decapping. So, once again, hammering an Omaha, except this time with HE shells. I think, maybe based on his experience attacking the first Omaha, he decided that at this kind of an angle, yeah, HE is probably the better bet. Because you might get some plunging hits. And actually, at this range... maybe you've got a decent chance of plunging hits, but I guess just with the amount of health this Omaha had left, he just felt it was a safer bet to try and whittle it away rather than risk lots and lots of AP shell bounces because of the awkward angle. And even a light cruiser, you can bounce like battleship shells just if you're angling, if your shell hits at a really unlucky angle, if your dispersion just decides, nope, the shell's going to hit this at just such an angle that it goes ping off that lightly armoured tier 4 cruiser, because why not? Anyway, this Omaha is desperately dodging for dear life, and he's actually doing a reasonably good job of it as well. And if he had more hit points, he might get away with it, but as it is, one shell will surely do it at this stage. And he is still continuing to weave. He wants to live, but it shall all be for naught. So that was A-Kit's 5th kill, I think? 4th kill. So having killed that Omaha and having lost both battleships, they did both finally succumb to those enemy destroyers. He then decides to go on the offensive. Now, he could just have, with less than 3 minutes remaining, stayed around B in a rather defensive position. But because these are both Japanese destroyers, I think he fancied his chances. And as we can see, that Hatsuharu is pretty low health. So if he kills this guy, and he maybe has enough time to kill him, because although they are fairly well up on points, and there we go, it's still like less than, well, at this point now it's less than kind of 20 points-ish. So the Minikaze he might not, but at least he got the Hatsuharu out of it, so yeah, and there we go, we're about to hit 1,000 points, so no final kill, but still, that's a Kraken Unleashed or Awoken or whatever the hell it's called, as well as Confederate Medal and that First Blood. So, at the end, he could have played it safe and decided to take the slightly riskier maneuver, but got slightly better rewards as a result. Even if he died, all that remaining cruiser, the Nuremberg lived! Why was I predicting his death? I don't know. Yeah, it probably still would have been a win, but as it was, he walked away with that very nice final medal. So again, an over 3,000 damage base XP game, but more of that would have been from capping than in the previous game. So no torpedo damage this time, it was all fires. 12k AP damage, 46k from the AHE, and 20k from 7 fires. So I think it probably took more hits to set those fires, but you know, the thing with fire is, even though if it does take more hits, the fire doesn't care in the end. The fire burns just as hot and just as brightly. And the rate of fire on the Kiev in particular, it's still a very formidable ship. And I'm sure its win rate is still very, very healthy. So, although in that game you might have noticed he had far fewer, well I say far fewer, comparatively fewer hit points than the first game, I don't think the Kiev has been hurt that badly. I think it's still one of the bright points of the Soviet destroyer line. So hopefully you've enjoyed this little comparison video. And if you have, you can leave any comments or thoughts about it below. You can hit the like button. You can sub to my channel if you aren't already. And, as always, stay tuned for more.